Obviously, everyone who is in here has great taste in presentations because this is going to be the best one.
Actually, oh wait, that wasn't the laugh time, right?
Yeah, that was.
Oh, no, okay, my bad.
Thank you, Lisa. At least I get a thumbs up. That just encourages me to continue with this. All right, I suppose we can get started. We might as well. Anyone can just kind of jump in as they come in. I forgot to introduce myself when I was speaking a couple of days ago, so I guess I should do that. My name is Matt Smith. I work at Ferris as an online design consultant. I've been working there, I don't know, just November, I guess I got hired, but I've been teaching for 20 years over at K-12. I have a passion for games-based learning and creating games-based learning and use them in the classroom. Andrew and I are going to speak in a little while here about games-based learning. And as much as I would love to talk about cognitive flow and all of the really cool games-based learning ideas, we're going to not do that in this session. We're going to actually focus on the tech side of a digital breakout room. So some of you might be wondering what that is exactly. And some of you might already know. I want you to think about an escape room. Maybe you've done that before, right? Face-to-face, even though really can't do that anymore. Escape room. And this is based on that idea of creating like a simulation where students can go in and try to figure out clues to get them through different puzzles to activate, just different pathways of learning. So what I would like to do, what I think would be most effective, is to run through a digital breakout that I made. And I won't go through, and it would take a little while to go through all of it, but I'm just going to kind of show you the different elements that are included in it. And then I'm going to show you some of the real features that you can use to make your own digital breakout room. Okay. So let me share my screen with you. And let's get started on this thing. Right here. So I called my breakout the online learning game, and this digital breakout is all about it's kind of like a foundations course about what you need to do to teach online. Okay, so if we're going to, as an online consultant, if we're going to tell everyone that you need to teach online, here, these are all the reasons, these are the best practices, why not practice what we preach and model to our students what we mean by that? And so this is an example of active learning, experiential learning, whatever you want to call it. This is made in Google Sites, as you can see up here. It was made in Google Sites, and it has a lot of different functionality things going on here. What you see right here is a Google drawing, okay? And the really cool thing about Google Drawings is that you can embed hotspots into them. And what I mean by that is, like, here's a picture of my desk. This is literally like my desk at the school where I teach. And I just kind of set it up, and I'll go through and I'll play the video for you to kind of set the scenario. But I purposely put this video on my screen to catch your attention, because that's what I want you to go to first. And just like any great escape room, right? They kind of want you to figure out the easy clues first. And there's different ways you can do that in this digital breakout. I also put an arrow on a Post-it note that directs your attention down. Okay, that was done on purpose as well, because as you start to scroll down, you see that I have a timer. Now, if you've done an escape room, every good escape room has to create that tension, that feeling of like, oh no, I've got to get this done. And that's what this attempts to do. Okay, very clearly says start the timer to your left. And when you push that, it's a countdown timer that YouTube provided, for free, and it has sounds to it too. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it because I don't think I connected, but it just does a little countdown. As it gets closer to the end, it starts to ramp it up, and it makes it a little more intense. Now that will be running in the background with the way that I set this up. So even though I go through this digital escape room, the countdown timer is always going. Now, like a escape room face-to-face, you've got a series of locks that you want to get open, okay? And there's all different ways to find clues to open these. Very specifically, I've said what you need to get through this. This is set up with a simple Google form. And I'm going to show you a really cool functionality that Google Forms has that allows you to not let your participant to be able to get past this without actually putting in the correct answer. Okay, that's what these little asterisks, these are required. So they can't just put anything in here and get through. I'm going to jump back up to the top though, because I want to talk about this Google Drawing real quick. When I mentioned that there were hotspots embedded in here, each of the items that are on this desk has the ability, when you scroll over it, if I made it a hotspot, and I don't know if you can see this, but my cursor is changing. So when I scroll over this hourglass, my cursor changes from an arrow to a finger pointing. Okay, and now what that means is that this is an interactive area for me to be able to connect to. So let's say that I'm a student, I just logged into this, I haven't started the timer yet, but I see this on the screen. I do mention in here, there's a drop-down menu that does give you a clue. This is basically, hey, you can click on things that are on this desk. So I'm going to click on the first thing a student would click on, which is this video. Our digital media specialist put this video together.
Smith. I'm the online designer here at Ferris in the e-learning department. I'm new, haven't got a chance to meet you, and you might think it's kind of weird.
Yeah, so rather than subject you to the whole video, I'll give you the gist of it. Like any good escape room, you want to set up a scenario that is a mystery and it leaves something unsolved and you have to figure out, right? You and the people that are in there have to figure out. And so that's what this scenario attempts to do. The scenario that we have is whoever's doing this, you know, this escape, this digital breakout, they are going on a sabbatical. They've been awarded a sabbatical, except, right, there's always a catch, except there's a replacement for them. A faculty is being hired and they're just not really very good at teaching online. And I'm going to scroll through it. So there he is. Dr. Jones is the faculty that was hired to replace you as you go on sabbatical. And the problem is, I mean, he's pretty good in the field, but he just has no clue how to teach online. So your job, okay, is to go through everything on my desk and see if you can't figure out how to teach Dr. Jones how to effectively teach online. So that's the gist of that video. You go through it, and I tell you, you know, I'll be right back. You have an hour, you know, it's set up so that you have an hour and I'll be right back. So now, as a student, you can really get the experience of kind of fooling around in this space. And I would tell you, as you know, the designer of this, it is really left open to your imagination what you want to do with this. You really can go any manner of ways in your classroom with how you want to set this up. So let me give you an example of just a couple things that I've done. So the keyboard is also embedded with a link. And if I click on that, it takes me into different faculty profiles. So these are some of the instructors that potentially we might hire. And they have security codes that you have to get into. Now, just like an escape room, some of the puzzles aren't just sequential, they build on each other. So in order to get the information for this particular activity, you actually need to access some of the files. And if you see the pictures over here, these pictures are the pictures of those people in here. In order to access some of these files, there's clues that are kind of spread throughout. So this is honestly just taken from online. But as you go through and read this about Bobby Hobgood, you notice that some of these letters, like in students here, is kind of out of place. This is a capital E where it shouldn't be. And as you go through and kind of read this, you can start picking out, there's another I. You can start picking out, there's a D. You can write all of these down. And what you'll see when you get to the end of it is that it spells a message for you, okay? And that message that you pick out is the passcode to open up Bobby Hobgood, his profile. Now, once you open up all of these instructors' profiles, that will give you one of the unlocks for one of these, that will give you the passcode for one of these unlocks. So what am I doing as an instructor? Well, I'm forcing them to read information that I want them to know, and I'm having them interact in a way that maybe they wouldn't have, interacted before. So that's one aspect or one puzzle from this game. But the cool thing is you can see there's a lot of puzzles in the game besides just that one. So let's say they click on the timer over here, the hourglass timer. This takes them to a really fun little site that actually say, what is the color of the word? Remember the sequence. This might be useful later, and it is actually useful. You have less than 2 seconds. So when we're ready to go, what is the color of the word red? Well, it's green, but I was too slow. So you see it says red, it's misleading, right? But it is actually green. Now what I like about this, so when you get to the end of this, you have to keep track of the first letter of all of the colors because that is the passcode to unlock. But what I like about this is at the end, I kind of make a point to say, hey, this seemed like it went really fast. And you may have had a hard time seeing that that was green, especially if you're colorblind. Imagine now that you're an online student. Is the information coming too fast? Have you planned for students with disabilities who maybe can't tell that that is green? So there's a lesson inside of a lesson, which is why we love this immersive learning where you can actually have fun while you're learning about what you're doing. There's a few other, each one, like I said, each one of these things has little games that go with them. Right here, they read an article right here, and this pulls out different games that they can play. But the point is that in order to create this, I'm not going to lie, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of planning as well. There's a million really cool activities that you can do. I was working on one for another one where they were getting chords off from another clue, and then there was an online virtual keyboard, and if they put in the right chords, just like what is that, Goonies, where you had the right chords, you played and something else opened up, you could do that as well. There's ways that you can hide text, so I could make this, instead of making it black, I can make it white, and it's on a white background, so the only way they would see it is if they put their cursor over it. There's a ton of different ways that you can include those escape room little games into this sort of scenario. So honestly, like I said, I wanted to give myself 15 minutes to show you this game, but we could talk about this game for an hour because there's a ton of things that go with it. But I don't want to limit us to just playing the game. I want you to walk away with something that's useful. So I'm going to go to Google, and I'm going to go to Google Sites real quick. And anyone can do this, okay? This is not, Google has, hold on, I want to create a site. Google has, and I'm going to make a new site just because Google recommends it. I mean, that's really the only reason. Anyone can do this. Google has made it super user-friendly to create a site and to do a lot of the things that I'm going to show you how to do. I have to keep moving us around as an audience because it keeps getting in my way here. So this was where the game that I just showed you, this was where it was born on this, in this Google Sites. In fact, this is exactly, what you would do to make a game. You can, through Google Sites, insert a lot of the things that I had over there. So for instance, that picture that I had of my desk, I made it in Google Drawings, and then I inserted it through the image tab, okay? You can put in a map, which might be kind of a cool thing where they have to find, Google does, I go off on tangents, I'm sorry. Google does this really cool thing where you can have a satellite view and you can like zoom right in on the place where you want to go. So why not, if you're teaching art history or something with history, zoom right in on the Louvre and have from that virtual picture, like you can do those gallery walkthroughs, you could find a painting that you wanted to use, and that was where you're hiding like your clue, and you could have them go through Google Maps to find that. That might be a cool thing. You could put in like the longitude, latitude. So there's a lot of options there, but what you really want to focus on is the forms, because the forms is what's going to create all your locks, okay? So let's just say I knew that I wanted to have a timer on here, okay? So I would put a divider in, and I would put in, maybe I go up here to the layouts, and I choose this layout right here. That's a picture on one side and some text on the other. Then I can go down here to the YouTube icon. I can drag that over there, and I could put in, I could just go to YouTube and type in YouTube hour timer, 45-minute timer, whatever you want. Then over here, I could kind of give the scenario, you know. Now, you don't have to go into as depth as I did by having a video and embedding that video. You could simply type your scenario out right here. You've got, you know, 30 minutes to solve the case of the missing puppy. Once you have that, down here you can put in your forms. Now you're going to want to make the form before you try to put it in. I'm going to use a form for another game that I made. So I'll just click on this, and then I say insert this form. Now you'll see that it lets me kind of put it wherever I want. I tend to like to kind of drag it into the middle. Like I said, Google is very user friendly. I can make it bigger if I want to, this way. Okay, and this is just design features of what I want it to look like when I'm done. Now, I'm going to take a break from the web page side of it, because what I want to show you is the Google Forms side of it real quick, because this is really where, if you know how to do this, you kind of have this thing figured out. Google Forms, and I know, I came over from K-12. We use Google everything. And when I got over, my colleagues were like, Google, we use Word. Word 365. I had no idea what they were talking about, because Google Forms does everything. So you're going to want to use a blank quiz, let's say. This is where you're getting all the bang for your buck here. So let's just say we're going to call this Lock 1. And then down here is where we make our question. You need to choose, when you choose your question, it needs to be a short answer question, and then you want to make it required. If you don't make it required, they can just skip it. This forces them to answer the question. And then here's the $1 million trick that you need to understand, the response validation option. Okay, this is how you can make sure that they enter exactly what you want them to enter, and it won't open unless you do. So I always put text instead of number. And maybe, let's say our password is, you know, a six-digit number. And I always pick text, even if it's a digit, like a number, a numerical value that they have to put in, because this will let me make sure that they put in exactly what I want them to. So let's say that their password is 123456, because that's what everybody uses. And then maybe I have this error text. So if they put in like whatever, you know, we're like, keep trying, close, but no cigar. And so this form now makes them put in a six-digit number, and it has to be this exactly. If it's not this, they get this response, okay? And so that's what I've done with every form that I have here. So I'm going to preview this real quick for you. This is the Google site that I was just showing you how to make, and I put in my form, my Google form. So I'm going to hit preview. This is what it's going to look like if it goes live. So this was a Google form that I made. I called it the Disability Simulator. And what I did is I put a YouTube link here to a video, and they had to pick in that video which of the following disabilities were present. And so I would have to type this exactly, these are my options. I would have to type this exactly as I see it. So maybe I thought, oh, this is blurry vision. I hope it's not for blurry vision. And I hit next. Well, that's not the right answer. And so this was my response. Do not solely rely on color to convey information on your site. It's not only people with color vision deficiencies that experience colors differently, and you can read the rest. You can put whatever response you want here, which is a very useful teaching tool. I mean, this is kind of leading them into the right answer. If they were paying attention, they'll know like, okay, it was between this one and this one, but this one really tells me it's actually this one. This will only open, Carl, so This is colorblind. This will only open if I put the correct answer. Now, because I put the correct answer, it lets me go on to the next question. So they could sit there banging their heads against the wall, but they wouldn't be able to open that form. Okay, you make that with this response validation right here. Now, there are a million combinations that you can use with this. I mean, you saw in this example, I linked a YouTube video that I made with a set option for them to choose from. There's really just a million different ways that you can use this Google form, okay? So Google Forms is really where it's at. And I said this at the beginning, and I'm gonna say it again. I have a half hour to present to you, probably an hour or two worth of content. And I'm gonna give you my email address after this. If any of this is something that interests you and you wanna know more about it, I'd be more than happy to share, point you in the right direction, or show you some other really cool digital breakouts that exist out there. So this was the Google form, okay? And this is maybe the most important part of the digital breakout that you need to know. I'm gonna show you Google Drawing how to do that hotspot that I did on my, oops, I spelled it wrong. Maybe it'll still take me there. It will. So this is Google Drawing. This is a super simple site to use as well, very user-friendly. What I did is I took my camera, took my cell phone, took a picture of my desk. Okay, I kind of set it up how I wanted it. I put a coffee cup here because I knew what I was going to do. And then I just inserted my image. I'm just going to put a random image in here. Let's just put another desk in. I got to move this. Let's get one with some stuff on it like this. All right, so here's our desk, here's our image. I'm going to drag it up to the corner, and then I'm going to crop it by dragging my corner of this. When I'm really thinking hard, my tongue starts wagging. So I don't mind that. Okay, so now I want to make these into hotspots. Right now, there's nothing going on with this picture except for that it's a picture that exists. In order to do that, I need to first, let's say I'm going to do something with this computer monitor. I want this to be a hotspot. So I'm going to outline the computer monitor like this. And what you see, and I picked the polygon tool, what you see is that it has a fill. So it's hiding the picture on the computer monitor. And so I want this to be transparent because I don't want to hide it. And I also don't want the line that I just created on there. So I'm going to make the line transparent as well. Now, this is super simple. You're going to love it. All I do is insert a link here. Now, I can link this to any website, anything I want. And so once I put my link in there, let's just make this go to Ferris, I guess. Once I put my link in there, when I scroll over that, the Ferris State link will pop up for me, and that's how you make your hotspot. You can get really creative with this, and you can link, like I did, you can link a video in there. You can make it link to a number of different forms and things like that. Now, the other nice thing about Google is as I'm working on this page, it's dynamic. So any changes I make to this page, this Google Drawing, if I have it on my web page that I created, oops, I'm jumping around here. If I have it on my web page, like if I have it on this web page, any changes that I make to this drawing automatically happen on that page. So I don't have to keep updating. It updates already. So that is how I make hotspots in a Google Drawing. And these are really useful. You can imagine having like a map up here maybe. You can have a picture. You can embed clues that way through you know, different pictures that you want to include. There's literally a ton of options for embedding different images.
Hey, Matt. Sue Collins was asking if there was any tutorials you might refer to. Would that just be have them send you an email?
Absolutely. If this is something that interests you, I know as soon as I found out, like, It's not really widely put together yet how to do digital breakouts. It's still kind of a new thing, and few people are doing it. But there are some great YouTube. If you type in digital breakout on YouTube, there's some really cool YouTube videos. You're kind of like an explorer right now in the world. But yes, absolutely. If you email me, I'd be happy to, put any of that together also.
And then Catherine was asking, does the link have to be a web page, or can you just send someone the picture with the hotspots? I think it has to link somewhere. It has to send them somewhere. Like, you can't just be a self-contained thing, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a great question. Can I link it within? So let's say I wanted to link within another Google document. Your Google documents are going to have a URL too, as long as you open up your sharing options. And that's the other thing that you have to make sure you do when you're making these, is make sure that these are shared, available to people that you want to be shared with. Because if you don't change those, they're going to click on it and it's not going to go anywhere. But you can link to forums or to other. Google is really dynamic in what it lets you do.
Right. So that was kind of my question, is I don't have to create a whole web page to make them access, let's say, this drawing or whatever, and it still would have the links and the hotspots in it?
Absolutely. In
Okay,
fact,
that was
one of my high school friends. He didn't want to go through and make the drawing with the embedded. He wanted it done by like Tuesday, so he just made a form and he used it as kind of like a quiz, but also a little bit like in a digital breakout, and it worked for him. And he could always go back and upgrade it when he had time. So yeah, it worked out really well.
It is also pretty close to time. I believe Tracy posted the link in chat for everyone to head back kind of to the closing. And then I believe we're coming back here for the final session.
Yes, and if anybody wants to get a hold of me, I'm going to put it in chat real quick. Maybe I'm going to stop sharing here. Yes. So if you want to get a hold of me and ask more questions, at some point I'll get all this together. So ferris.edu. This is, oops, that was privately. Somebody sent me a message privately.
And they now know your email address.
Everybody will here in a second. Here we go. Smith44@ferris.edu. There. If you want to get a hold of me, I'd be more than happy to kind of share what I have, show you some other examples of other people's. Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming. Hopefully you learned something that you can use, and Andrew and I will see you again in our separate breakout at what, 2 something? 2:30?
I think it'll be in about 15 minutes. I think they're going to do 15 minutes for like a wrap up and then final session.
Perfect. See you there.
Matt, I just want to say that this is one of the most interesting things that I've come across in this seminar or in these 3 days, mostly because I just need to take the leap, right? And to dive into something new. And I'm absolutely sure it's a ton of work, but if you could set it up where all you have to do is adjust something to the current moment or something, it's an exercise you could use forever in all your classes.
Absolutely. Yeah, the work is up front. It's all totally front loaded. When you're done with it. Yeah.
I love it.
What I love about it is I can set off a kid who's maybe ahead of the game or really needs help on one, specific thing and say, here you go, do this on your own time, or, here's something extra.
Well, you know what I'm going to do, because I have the real problem with breaking up my lectures, because I feel like that doesn't teach deep thinking. But what you could do is interrupt it with something like this that says, okay, now show me you understand what we just did before I move on to the next thing, or better yet, like the library research thing that they hate doing. But you could make it fun like this. I think, I don't have kids, so I'm not like hip in this way that younger people are with young families and stuff. So I need to keep up with this sort of thing just to keep my students sort of interested in what is often serious work, but can be made fun. But I really appreciate your expertise and the way that you presented the material. It was easy for me to grasp, and I see the value of it, and I'm definitely going to put some time into it.
Sue,
yeah.
Remind me, so if you're coming back to the next section, remind me, there's a library research game called Search and Destroy.
Awesome. I'd love to know. And by the way, I sent the link to the one that you gave us to my linguist professor colleague, who was freaking out when she saw that. I'm like, I know we need to, like, her kids are already married with children, so she's not She's, you need children. They're the thing that keep you up on this sort of stuff. But yeah, I sent that link. I'll try to remember that because I will be at your session. So see you in a minute. Thanks, you guys.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
See everybody. Thank you. Is it right back in here, Andrew?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay. I'll change my background then. I really felt like, and I knew going in, like, oh my gosh, I have so much to talk about. I try not to talk fast because I have a tendency to do that when I want to cover a lot of stuff. I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. Here's all the cool stuff that I think you will love.
Drinking from the fire hose of knowledge.
Yeah. Well, there's a ton of different things. So those were kind of the basics for a digital breakout, but honestly, there's a lot of different little interesting like nuances that you can do, little puzzles that are fun that, that you can incorporate into it. I really would love to have talked about like looking at your learning objective, breaking that down, deciding the best way to make a breakout from that. But this was breakout based boot camp.
In 30 minutes or less, which was really 25 minutes or less, which after you put in a closing is really 20 minutes or less. And so, yes. You just going to hang out with us, Mary? You're muted. Oh.
I apologize. I just got the agenda for the virtual symposium, and I had heard such great things about the presentations that I was trying to get into this breakout session. And you guys are in Michigan, correct?
Correct.
So I thought it was going to begin at 2 o'clock, 2:15.
Yep, that's the next one.
Okay.
So that's the one on game-based learning. We'll be doing that. That's the next show.
Great, excellent. So yeah, no, I'll be here.
Cool.
Looking forward to it. Okay.
So what type of things on game-based learning are you interested in, or is that just a topic that you've heard of, or?
No, this is something that we've talked about quite a bit in our professional development. We use, some kind of gamey things like, of course, Kahoot, and other types of games in our classes. But because there's it's such a quantum leap in terms of student engagement, I was really hoping to get some new information and new approaches to this.
Sure. Any particular discipline? I mean, this is honestly some like prime, let's brainstorm, and this is what I love to do.
We teach English for academic purposes at Illinois Tech.
Okay.
And so our students are grads and undergrads who enter the university, and they are, they're students who, maybe really skilled and excel in their particular discipline, but they need to work on their English language proficiency. And one of the things that we've found is in the shift to teaching online, student engagement has really started to tank for a variety of reasons, pandemic, different time zones, just isolation, all of these different things. And so especially for some of our students, it seems like, they're trying. For some of them, their engagement is, still pretty strong, but for others, it seems like they're checking out a little bit. And so, gamification really seems to bring them back in.
There's a lot of good hooks there.
You bet. So does that answer your question?
So it looks like your sound went away.
Did it? Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Huh. So one of them, just to kind of keep talking here, I'm going to put this in chat.
Okay.
Oh, that actually looks like my internet. I probably have 2 kids on Zoom meetings right now, so
Gotcha.
that might be interesting here in a bit. But it's a traditional card game that our librarians use.
Okay.
And it's for research literacy.
Mm-hmm.
And we've used this quite a bit to teach basic search functions in library databases.
Oh, great. Good.
Yeah, Lee, I can't tell them. I think it's their band instructor and their principal are the two meetings that they've scheduled back to back. So.
Okay. All right, gotcha.
I know where my priorities are.
No, for sure. I'm lucky because I'm the only one on my internet, so I've got all the bandwidth.
Yeah, I drilled a hole in the floor. I'm down in the basement, but just so I could hardwire into it. So
Yeah, that's smart.
that should do it.
Yeah.
One of the other ones, and this is one the other individual was referencing earlier, Thorny Games is a really good kind of English linguist website, and I'll link that here in chat too.
Thank you.
But they have 3 different games there. I've only played one of them. And like I said, it's just one of those that you're like, this just fits so many curriculums that why wouldn't you teach this way? We've had to do some creative things to kind of get them online. And there's some like virtual card simulators that you can do. Tabletop simulator kind of really gives you a sandbox environment.
Okay.
Where you can do all sorts of things that you would do in normal games. Like, you roll dice, you move pieces, stuff like that, but there's no rules associated with it. Okay. So it basically like, here's just all of the simulated stuff to play games and play a game. It'd be like if we were playing poker, I could pick up the deck of cards and just fling them in the air.
Right.
And you're like, well, you can do that here too, just don't.
Yeah, the Department of State came out with a game, a language learning game, and I think the name of it was Trace Effects. But I'm not sure if that is still, it was, created a while ago as part of a fellowship, and I'm not sure if it's still kind of in the hopper. And I mean, we do a lot of, in some classes that I've taught, we do a lot of, gamifying with things like, vocabulary. So I create like I did an online Jeopardy board, and my students just instantly, like their fluency goes up, their proficiency goes up, they're collaborating actively, and you can just see the difference so clearly. And that's, like for the effective filter, that makes a huge difference, if they're really enjoying it and engaged. So
I just threw another link in there. So my doctoral work is all in game-based learning, and I actually made a board game for a freshman seminar class.
Okay.
So this actually, it's a physical board game. You take it out, students play it, and it gives them something to talk about. Okay. So it's enrolling in classes, it's studying, it's making priorities, it's the random life events. It's all sorts of fun stuff.
Cool, great. Thank you for those.
That was just that was a super fun project that it's so practical because every university, every college seems to have this freshman seminar course. And it seems like most of them end up with like, hey, here's a PowerPoint on financial literacy. And you're like, oh, dear God, I don't want to ever hear that again.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I built into is so at the start of every turn, you have to pick up a debt token. And they hate it. And I love it that they're actually, before you start every turn, before you get to enroll in any classes, before you get to do anything, you're picking up debt.
Right.
And they're like, well, why? I don't like that. And like I said, it's just one of those kind of fun game elements that you're like, it really hits home what they're doing. Right.
It also, yeah, it really does, it, contributes to collaboration, and it does, really good things for autonomy. And, even small things like, I do a scavenger hunt with my syllabus.
Yep.
Which, every single time, because it just makes, rather than, kind of the, you know, the zoned out look, and then the, you know, sheets of paper that kind of go away, and then policies later on. They're like, I didn't know this. If you do the scavenger hunt, or you do it in, you know, a more gamified fashion, then, you know, that really makes a difference.
Did you get to hear a little bit of the virtual breakout room, the session previously that Matt was doing?
I didn't, no,
Okay.
unfortunately.
So I've seen a really cool, rather than the scavenger hunt, you actually make it a breakout room. So it's the clues to unlock extra credit are all the clues in the syllabus.
Okay.
And so if as a collective, everyone in the class can break out of your syllabus, they will unlock the extra credit column in the class.
Oh, cool. Great.
And then they start helping each other because they're like, what are you stuck on? Oh, you didn't get their office hours here. That was found on page 4.
Right. Good. Yeah, I'm hoping, I think I saw a mention that the recordings would be available. So I emailed, you know, to see if I could get access to those, because I would love to watch these. I'm sorry that I missed them, you know, in their real-time format.
Schedules are crazy.
They are, you bet. Yeah, and, you know, kudos to you. I do not know how people are doing, you know, like homeschooling, childcare, all of these things at the same time as they're trying to work. So
My wife has a very flexible schedule. She's a professional editor.
okay.
And so she can, when we can schedule around that.
Good.
So she'll take out her red pen of doom and edit things as my day frees up, and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a little hard to break out of, I'm finding, the 9 to 5 thing, because, you know, I work much better in the evening, but you know, those are the times that I feel like I should be in front of the screen ready to answer questions, which, yeah, you can do that. But, you know, with, you know, tech, you can also answer questions at different times too. So yeah.
Yep. It's definitely unique.
It is a unique situation. Where is Ferris State, by the way?
Kind of middle Michigan,
Okay.
hour north of Grand Rapids.
Okay, gotcha. All right. And how far south of the UP are you?
About 3 hours, maybe 3.5.
Okay, gotcha. I have a friend who really badly wants to move to Marquette. He loves it up there. He says it's a really interesting community, very pretty.
That's where I did my undergrad.
Oh, really? Great.
Yep. So that's also where I met my wife, and that's her favorite place in the world, is that shore of Lake Superior there.
Oh.
I could drop her off there and pick her up in a month, and she wouldn't even know time passed.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Good. Good.
If you're ever up there, there's a wonderful bed and breakfast called Nestle Down.
Nestle Down.
Yep.
N-E-T-L-E?
I think so.
Okay.
You can Google it. It's a Swedish theme. They've got a sauna in the basement, and they're like 100 feet from Lake Superior.
Oh, fun. Yeah. I'm originally from Minnesota, and so I've gone up to the Boundary Waters a few times with my husband, which is, you know, kind of west of that area. Yeah, so yeah, no, but, you know, I love the North for sure.
So this is the informal chit-chat session right before we talk about game design and gamification and game-based learning and all that fun stuff.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's just to say, feel free. I was kind of talking to the empty, muted, video disabled void that I see here.
Yeah.
Unless they want more tips on bed and breakfast and Marquette travel tourist destinations.
Yeah, I've heard that it's a really progressive area.
Especially within the backdrop of the Upper Peninsula.
Yeah. That seems to be fairly characteristic. This has nothing to do with game-based learning, but it's very similar in Minnesota. You have pockets of, you know, just very, very progressive communities, especially in Minneapolis. And then, you know, like all around, you have a completely different population of people who drink beer in trucks and carry guns with them. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but
It's not that. You're very accurate. The only thing I would say is that's the one place where I go, the guns are actually appropriate, because I know enough people that are like, I was on my way to get mail and there was a bear. And you're like, yeah, that's fair. I want to be able to make loud noise and make sure it goes away.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's similar in Minnesota. There's, my family lives out in the country, there's no kind of immediate assistance. If you call 911, it's going to take them a half an hour to get there.
Yep.
And we have critters come through, coyotes and, sometimes sick animals too. So, but.
Yep. It only takes one mama bear that woke up on the wrong side of the den that you go,
yeah.
nope. One of our neighbors literally 2 days ago posted their front door webcam, and it was 2 cubs and a mama bear walking through her front yard.
Oh, wow.
And you're like, yeah, don't take the little dog out on a walk tonight. Just,
no.
Just don't.
No. Yeah.
All right, we're getting kind of close here. I think we were technically supposed to start at 2:15, but we're kind of given a little bit of extra time here for the transition and the flow between the two, and we'll kind of see how that goes.
Okay. So what level of tech proficiency do you need to do game design?
So when I teach game design, it's board games. So I don't even talk about technology. And so Ferris State University actually has a really rock solid digital animation game design program.
Okay.
And we don't start them on technology in some of the basic stuff. It's just like, you just need to know game mechanics, game theory, psychology, like that type of stuff.
Okay, good.
Because otherwise you're like, otherwise it's, intro to coding. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Right.
That being said, we do kind of throw them into intro to coding right away, but.
Yeah, the only one question, because I've been in English language teaching for quite a long time, is that it's great to have something. It's great to have something that's gamified, but I'm always reminding people, especially, kind of relatively young teachers or like super tech savvy teachers, that the learning objective the game has to serve the learning objective, not vice versa. So, it's shiny, it's great, it's a lot of fun, you get to press buttons, but if it's not, kind of reinforcing content, then it has to figure it out.
Yep. In the game-based learning circles, that's called chocolate-covered broccoli.
Oh, really?
Because you're forcing the broccoli on them, and you're just slapping chocolate on it. And in some aspect, that should be good, but nobody wants it.
Right.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to see if I can share a screen here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're talking a little bit about kind of why game design and why that kind of philosophy should be part of your teaching pedagogy, teaching philosophy, something along that line. I'm Dr. Andrew Peterson, Andrew Peterson at ferris.edu. Kind of my partner in crime here, Matt Smith. I told him I'd like to talk about this stuff, and he didn't fight me, so I get to have this
Today I am Vanna White.
I'd like to buy a vowel. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm kind of that shy, awkward kid in the blue. Actually, I'm swapping out discs for my Commodore 64 there with my blurry friend Tom Morris in about 6th grade. I'm also sitting here wearing wonderful camo pants in a modified version of Monopoly that I made. So I was kind of always this shy, awkward kid who really liked game stuff, which might obviously really surprise you. Might not also. But I loved baseball cards. And I could tell you about every baseball card that ever existed. I would tell you about my 1985 Mark McGwire USA rookie card and how many I had and what condition they were in. And all you had to do to get me to engage with you was to say, hey, what about these baseball cards? And I would go on this 45-minute tirade of just everything that you ever wanted to know about all of them. And it got to be to a point where it almost kind of flipped around. So my mom would kind of start saying, whenever I was talking too much about it, she would just say, let me tell you about my baseball cards. Because that was my cue that I should shut up, that I was talking way too much about this, that the other person might not be interested in it. But it was kind of like my on-off switch. I knew so much about it, and I was so passionate about it that I could talk about this in infinite amounts with anyone that would be willing to listen. And what I found with my son is that he would do the same thing in Minecraft. So over here, I don't know if you can see my cursor at all, but right there is my son, and he is giving a presentation about Minecraft EDU to a bunch of educators. And he is doing this at a conference, and he is presenting at 12 years old. And he is absolutely loving this. He is telling the library, this was mostly librarians in this particular event, but he's telling them how to make pickaxes, why they shouldn't be building a dirt house and how no one will respect them if they do that, and how not to do that. And if you told a typical, I think that was probably maybe like 6th grade, 7th grade, somewhere in there, that they were going to have to present to a bunch of librarians, the idea of that would just terrify most people. But you go, hey, you want to go play Minecraft and tell them what to do and how to do it? Oh yeah, that's amazing. And they'll listen to me and they'll respect my authority. And I'll be able to kind of drive this whole conversation around something that I'm passionate about. And I thought that was a really cool example of how individuals are doing very academic things, or things that we have to usually force or add some artificial value to, that the students might not be willing to do. And here he's just like, yes, please, I would like to do that. That sounds like something that would be amazing. All right, I'm gonna see if I see chat coming through, but I can't see what it is. Matt, can you kind of monitor that? And
Yeah, so there's been some suggestions about what other people's kids could probably present on. Mine would be like picking boogers, but it sounds like Rhonda's grandson would be really good. So.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, almost everyone kind of has a passion. We've seen that a lot with our esports team. And that's kind of where this talk originally morphed from, is kind of that academic setting of esports. And we've got people that are acting as shoutcasters that barely passed public speaking. But all of a sudden you're putting them behind, or in front of a green screen, and you're having them talk about Overwatch, and they're sitting there narrating a 3-hour gaming session, and they're enunciating, and they're passionate, and they're telling you the strategies, and they're engaging with you. And then they're told to give an 8-minute speech about what they did over spring break, and they just fail. And you're like, I kind of see a difference here. This goes back to some of the learning theories that Allison and Julie were talking about in some of the lunch sessions.
Andrew, I'm gonna jump in. I always like to use the example, and you would remember her name, that she gave on a TED Talk about the amount of hours that it takes. There's a certain amount of hours that, if you're a student, that you go through throughout your school career. I forget what the exact number.
That was McGonagall.
Rule. Yeah, McGonagall talked about it, but it was based on the book or the
Malcolm Gladwell, the 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you practice, if you put in 10,000 meaningful, specific hours into whatever you want to do, his theory was that you would be an expert at it. And when we look at students now, outside of school, from, I forget what McGonagall said, she said 7th grade to 12th grade maybe, our students are putting 10,000 hours into video games.
Yep, they said by the time you're 22, the average, it was like adult male, has put in 10,000 hours in gaming.
Yeah, so they're virtual experts in what they do. And so instead of trying to fight that, why not embrace that?
Yep, embrace it and make it the content that they should be talking about, that we're going to assess them on and their skills. All right, so this is going to require some chat. How many people know how much it costs if you land on someone else's Actually, I should say first, what's the most expensive property in Monopoly?
Looks like everyone's saying boardwalk.
All right, that was the easy mode. All right. So how much does boardwalk cost if you want to buy it?
I'm seeing some guesses. 400, 500, 3,200. I think that's
400. 400 is the winner.
400.
All right, and then the super hard bonus question. How much is it if you land on someone else's boardwalk when they have a hotel on it?
Waiting for answers to come in. 2,000, 1,000.
All right, it's 2,000.
Okay.
All right, so who was it that guessed 2,000?
Did she get a hotel? Amber.
Okay, so Amber, when was the last time you played?
Not that long ago with my kids.
Okay, that's it's kind of funny because in most settings where I get this, they're like, "Oh, I haven't played in 100 years," but obviously with pandemic, I've seen more people playing games like this than. But I guess what I kind of always come back to is, why do you remember that?
Because I've lost it. I always land on it. Because I always land on it, and I always lose all my money there, and I die.
There's an emotional connection to it, and it's real world, not like you. Like before I roll the dice, I make sure I've got $2,000 before I pass there, and it is, and this has always fascinated me because almost anywhere I give a talk, I always give the same quiz. I have had once where someone didn't know the 2,000. That's it. And I've probably given this, honestly, probably 30, 40 times now. And it always just amazes me that people can remember this one tiny little fact out of all the other random information that they know. And I'm like, that's kind of what a lot of times education feels like. I'm just trying to get you to remember all of these little stupid facts. And here's a perfect example of one that you can remember. And years past, it's actually been useful. Oops, I think I went. So this is the slide where I usually brag about myself. I'm Andrew. I've made games. I teach game design. I really don't feel like bragging today. So we'll just leave it at that. I do a lot of fun stuff. We'll talk a little bit more about the actual stuff later. This is a game I designed for my doctorate project. It was a lot of fun. It's a freshman seminar game. And we'll leave it at that. So at Ferris, I created the Game-Based Learning Institute, which, as I've said before, it's a very official sounding thing, but it's really for the most part just me. And it helps me get funding requests through. Because it's not Andrew asking for a game, it's the Game-Based Learning Institute, and it's really for a faculty member that I'm helping. And these are some of the different examples of things that we've created and things that we do. Just, I guess, a real quick high level, Reacting to the Past is probably one of the most successful ones. That's a role-playing game. They've got probably 20 different role-playing scenarios that you use in the classroom. Everyone kind of takes on different roles, and you have different scenarios where you kind of learn the different viewpoints and factions, and you debate, and sometimes it goes ahistorical, but you have a deeper understanding of why there was an intellectual collision between these kind of different factions. Pandemic has always been a fun one, playing that in the classroom. Again, it's a physical board game. We've done some escape rooms. That Search and Destroy, that's a card game that our librarians use to teach database searching. It's pretty cool. SimCity, we actually used in an urban planning class. That one had kind of a funny story. The gentleman that was teaching it was a lawyer by trade. And he basically said, I'm teaching a 4-hour night block class. I'm a lawyer. I can stand up and just start talking for 4 hours, but please don't. I don't want to do that. Don't make me do that to the students. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And he's like, honestly, it's like urban planning, like literally city layouts and taxes and infrastructure. And he goes, it's not really that engaging. I'm like, oh, I've played that game. That was on my Commodore 64. That was Sim City. And you could play it and design it and build it, and you'd find out where there was traffic congestion, all this stuff. And he's just kind of looking at me like, that's a game? Like, that's something that you can do? And so we actually ended up buying a copy of Sim City for all the students. And what would happen is he would lecture for like an hour on green spaces. And then he would say, okay, for the next hour in class, I want you to build a city either with all green space or no green space. Pick an extreme and go for it. And then at the last couple hours of the class, they would debrief on what their experience was. So like some of them that had like lots of green space, they'd be like, wow, I really had to have a lot of taxes to support all this stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, because 90% of your city was green space and you had no industry infrastructure. That's a good debate. Other of them that had none, they would be like, my city satisfaction level was like 4%. And they're like, yeah, that's the Cleveland scenario. Don't do that. I shouldn't pick on Cleveland. That's probably a pretty nice city these days. But, you know, the point being that the students had something to talk about. So it wasn't just them talking about their books. It was them talking about their gaming experience, which actually reflected some of the lessons that the instructor was trying to get to. So I started teaching game design quite a while ago. Let's go 10, 12 years ago. And I was always amazed at my students. So the students that would come into my intro to game design class quite often were, there's really no nice way to say it, the less than academically gifted students. So they would take this class because it sounded fun and they just needed something that they wouldn't fail at. And every day I would walk by the nursing students and they're sitting there and they're writing out these cards and these, you know, just stacks upon stacks of note cards and going through them and trying to memorize them. And they would sit there and they would have a stack of maybe 500 index cards by the end of the semester, just memorizing them over and over and over and over. And while I was teaching game design, one of the card games that was fairly popular was called Magic the Gathering. I believe at current count, there's over 10,000 cards. And I could show my students one of these cards, pretty much at random. And they would tell me what the cost was, what the effect was, what the quote on the bottom of the card was, who the artist was, what decks it would go in, and what ones it wouldn't. And so literally here's 10,000, lack of a better term, index cards that are part of a game that my students could tell me about on site. And yet they were the ones that were struggling academically. And then I look over here and here's the nursing students, which historically speaking were like the best of the best. They are the ones that could memorize anything. And they're, you know, working their butt off and memorizing 500 index cards all semester. And it always just fascinated me that there was the skill sets there. You know, they're just not applying themselves. And that was kind of one of those things that I kept kind of trying to drill into the students, that if you can make a game out of it, you can memorize it. You've shown me that you have the ability. You're just not motivated in the right areas. And so we would spend time talking about different games and how to do things in other parts of their classes. But I always thought that was kind of an interesting observation, that the gamers were really memorizing infinite more information than the academically gifted nursing students. So I have to throw in some Calvin and Hobbes just because I don't know how much we can see these, or if I should try and zoom in a little bit there. Miss Wormwood, yes, Calvin, you can present the material, but you can't make me care. And then rumor has it that she's up to 2 packs a day. And I really think that's kind of the critical thing, is you can present material, but you can't make me care. Well, I don't really care about presenting material. I just want you to care. If I can make you care, you can find the material. Content is everywhere. You're a Google search away from like more information than anyone has ever had the history of having access to ever. All I have to do is make you care about something and you can do the rest. One of the examples for that is in World of Warcraft, fishing. It is the most boring digital activity I've ever heard of in my life. You literally, you're in this super highly engaged gaming environment, and you have to go buy a fishing rod, go find some water, and throw your bobber into the water. And then you wait for between like 45 and 55 seconds, and the bobber might move. And when it moves, you click on it. And when you click on it, there might be a fish there. And 1 out of about every 10 times, your skill level might go up. Your skill level caps at, I believe it was 450 last time I played. And so you can literally spend 40 hours just leveling up a fishing skill in this game. And it always amazed me that people would do this. And you go, the game creators actually made some final bosses that required maxed out fishing skills. So as soon as they put in some real world value to this, people were grinding out this fishing skill just to kind of add that value to their guild. So they were creating this artificial motivation for it, and it worked. People were doing this rather boring skill because it was part of the game. So one of the unique things when I first started teaching game design, I was actually going for my master's degree in curriculum and instruction at the same time. And while I was in my curriculum design courses, these were some things that constantly came up. These words shouldn't surprise anyone. If I said that you're reading your typical curriculum textbook, you're going to find words like engagement and reinforcement, assessment, scaffolding. We've talked about these over the last 3 days. I think I've heard every single one of these words in at least one session. It's kind of curriculum design 101. You're talking about engaging your student population, reinforcing the content that you're learning, how you're assessing their knowledge of that information, and how that information is building upon each other. Like I said, it's I don't want to say too basic, but that's kind of the too long didn't read version of every curriculum and instruction master's degree. And while I'm learning this, I'm going through a game design. I'm teaching game design. Let's see. Oh, it's because I zoomed in a little bit. And so while I'm teaching my students game design, we're covering things like, how do you motivate players? What kind of rewards you should give them? How do you keep score? And what type of progression are you doing in games? Why does someone want to play your game? That's their motivation. What kind of rewards are you giving them in the game? Are they unlocking a new skill? Is there a new piece of equipment? Is there a social leaderboard? A top 10 scoreboard? And why is level 2 different than level 1? These were kind of the main things that I would cover in a lot of my game design courses. I think that honestly, these are probably chapters 1, 4, and 5 in the current textbook I use. And kind of my big aha moment was, what's the difference here? Obviously, the curriculum design words are much bigger. They use more syllables, which I don't want to say education is really good at doing, but education is really good at using really big words. Game design, we managed to say the word score, whereas curriculum design says assessment, but it's really the same thing. You're measuring progress. Reinforcement, that you're telling the student good job. It's the same thing that you're doing in game design. The student engagement, it's the same thing with game design. You have to motivate players to play your game. Otherwise, they're not going to play it. And if a player doesn't play your game, it doesn't matter what else you do. Scaffolding, if your last chapter of your textbook doesn't care about your first chapter of your textbook, why is the first chapter of the textbook there? Same thing with the game. If you're playing the same thing over and over, it's going to get really boring really quick. You have to build upon what you already know. Otherwise, why are you doing it? So what, this is kind of the universal, I don't know how many times we've seen this, but the Bloom's taxonomy of game design. So on the right, we've got the kind of the typical Bloom's taxonomy, the remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. Matt, is there an updated version of that one, or did I get that all right? This is your pop quiz.
Wait, I'm muted.
Okay.
There's some other terms that they put in as like annotations or expansions, but yeah, the right hand is the blooms.
Yep. And so what I found is that kind of, and Amber gave me the thumbs up too, so thank you. On the left-hand side, it was kind of the game design version of it. So if I ask you how to play, we always call that frozen tag, you know, on the playground. If you can tell me the rules of it, that's just kind of the basic, basic level of understanding. If you can explain the rules to me, all right, you're getting a little bit better. I can see that you understand it. If you can actually use the rules. So now if we actually get into play is a good mid-level tier of what you're doing. I know you really understand play when you start exploiting the rules. So, you know, you get the tag backs and no tag backs, and you kind of run around the jungle gym in a way that you can kind of defend yourself better. As you're exploiting those rules, I know you're really understanding it. And as you're developing strategies around those exploitations or around those rules, it's about as high as you get, with the exception of when you start modifying those rules. So now rather than, you know, the frozen tag game, now maybe it takes 2 people to unfreeze someone or something like that. You can kind of be as creative as you want there. But when you start modifying the things, that's where you have to understand everything else in order to be able to do that. And I always thought that was kind of a neat parallel between the kind of the gaming, and the understanding sides. One of the big differences between the two, between education and games. So in education, when we talk about failure, it's like big bad, like we do everything we can to stop failure. Failure is a big bad word. That means that everything has failed and all the supports are gone, and it's super kind of high risk, high reward, but we just can't fail people. Like it's really hard to do that. And what has always amazed me about games is you design for failure. One of the things that you want to consider as a game designer is, how do people lose? You know, what happens when you die? What happens, you know, what's the penalty for trying and failing? Should there be one? Shouldn't there be one? And it's built into the game mechanics. And this is where I just kind of put on my old curmudgeon hat and go, why can't education be like that? That involves more of sitting at a bar and drinking a beer and curmudgeoning over that. But when I control the world, that'll change. Obviously, a nice, fun Edison quote: "I have not failed. I've found 10,000 ways that don't work." I'd love education like that. If someone's passionate about something, let them fail 9,999 times. Why not? They're probably learning in each of those attempts, as long as they're different. If they fail the same way every time, then we're going to have a talk. And then I want to talk a little bit about kind of where the struggle should be in kind of both games and in education. So if you look at golf, it's probably a super simple analogy of game and game design. If this is what golf looked like, no one would play it. It's too easy. You see kids that are bored in school, that are bored with education because it is sometimes too easy for them. You're like, why am I even showing up to play this? I brought my clubs, I showed up, I went out to the course, and this is the challenge you give me? Here, I'm just going to kick it in the hole and then we're going to walk away. Don't waste my time. And then you've got other scenarios. This isn't golf. This is called losing golf balls. I would probably try it a couple times, but if this is the course that you set up for me to play on any regular basis, I'm done. I'm not playing. This is silly. I've been in classrooms like this before, and you swear it's designed to fail. It's a weeder class. It's academic rigor. It's all these things that we want to not necessarily model ever. And then there's kind of a variation. You do want a challenge. You want it to be interesting, engaging, kind of a middle of the road. There's a high risk path. There's a safe path. It's a stimulating environment. This is a well-designed course. I don't even know if it really exists. It feels a lot more like a photoshopped course, but like I said, it's kind of a nice balance between the two. It allows for multiple paths. Something else that I can't quite relate to, weightlifting. Same type of thing. If you're lifting 1 pound weights, what are you really doing? You're not doing much. There's no growth, there's no challenge. Likewise, if it's too heavy, you're not doing anything. You're just sitting there being unhappy. It's not even worth showing up. You're going to sit there and you're going to struggle. You're going to have a bad time. It's not worth it. You need to kind of have that middle of the road scenario where you struggle, but it's not too hard. If you look, there's a person behind them so that when they do struggle, and they should, there's support systems around them to help them when they fail. And so one of the, I forget which one it was now, but one of the keynotes that I went to on game-based learning, they talked about one of the only classes they almost failed in college was weightlifting. And when he asked the instructor why, he's like, I show up every single day for all the labs. I come in, I do my 10 reps of these things on the stations, and I do them, and then I go home. And the instructor was like, yeah, you come in, you've never struggled, you do the minimum that you know that you can do, you've never improved. What you did on day 1 is what you did on day 180. What's the point? You never grew. You never pushed yourself. So yeah, you should fail. The point of doing this was to challenge yourself, and you didn't do it. So here's your C- and good day, sir. And I don't know how much of that's true. Like I said, it made for kind of a good keynote storyline, but it made me think that, yeah, if someone comes into your class as a beautiful writer and they write, and then at the end of the semester, they haven't changed at all, and they're still doing the same thing as when they came into your class, what's the point? Whereas if someone came in as like barely able to read and write, and they got up to being able to do 5-paragraph essays. No, it's not ideal, but the amount of individual growth there is respectable. So this is one of the things that we talk about in our game design class quite a bit, is the difficulty curve. And you always kind of want to try and stay in that middle green area. If you go too far in that upper left-hand side, it's very hard and very low skill player. So it's super frustrating. Inversely, in the lower right-hand side, it's very high player skill and super easy. And they're just bored out of their mind. And so you kind of have to have that dynamic middle engagement level of the balanced fun. It should start out easy with lower player skill and then slowly progress up into harder and higher player skill. And as they follow that curve along the line, their skill set changes. And this is where we get into the flow theory. And this is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which that's all I like to do is say his name. I practice that. There's a 8-second long YouTube video that taught me how to pronounce it. If you try and do a Google search with it and you end up typing anything in the world like Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, it's going to go to him. Did I get that right, Matt?
Oh, I love it.
All right.
Say it again. That's candy.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
It's based on, a lot of his work was based on Vygotsky. So if you're an educator, you know about him. And it's really all about cognitive, what you can handle, cognitive load. And it really pairs well with that first graph that Andrew showed you. It's essentially the same thing. But there's a state of flow, and you've probably been in it before. Think about playing basketball and you get on this roll where you just can't miss anything. That's the learning state that we want our students to be in. And studies have shown that when a student is in that flow channel, they can perform at higher levels than what they normally would. So you maybe have a lower level student in that flow with other high level students, and the learning is just leaps and bounds above any other type of interaction they can do. Really interesting stuff. But sorry, Andrew.
No, that's perfect. And that's kind of really the closing. I think I've got 1 or 2 more slides. Oh, yep. So we need to have balance because that's the whole point of the previous slide. And then I wanted to really assign homework to everyone because I'm an educator and that's apparently what I'd like to do. But there's a lady by the name of Constance Steinkuhler. She did amazing work and research out of UW-Madison for a number of years and then got recruited to over UC Irvine. And is doing some amazing things over there with game-based learning and student engagement and esports. And so if you can do a Google search for her, actually, I'm going to go ahead. I wonder if I can copy that. I might just put that in chat. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to put in, hey, that worked. Yay. So what I would say is that's your homework. Watch that. Listen, take notes, follow Constance on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, all that other happy fun stuff is. She does a lot of really interesting research on using games to engage students, specifically in writing. A lot of what she was doing was fanfic in English, and she was finding that students were able to write multiple grade levels higher when they were allowed to write about games and games they liked. And she's like, this is one of her big findings was that like states pay big bucks for learning management systems and learning outcome curriculums that'll supposedly help students grade, help students raise their grades by like 5 percentage points. And she's like, well, I just raised them up by 15 percentage points by letting them write about a game. So why don't we all just kind of save a bunch of money and let them write about whatever they want, and we'll all be better off for it. So I suppose that was a spoiler alert. I should have said that. Any kind of questions? I don't know. Actually, with the modified time, we got about another 5 minutes. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I just like to add to, when we talk about games-based learning, there's 2 sections, really games-based learning and gamification. A lot of people have probably heard of gamification. That's where you add like a leaderboard or points to your class. And
badges. Oh.
Yeah, that's an effective way to get your students to learn. But it's important to know that, there's 2 different ways. Online, if you're thinking about teaching online and using gamification, there's some programs out there like Badger that gives you the badge system through Canvas. There's also a website called ClassQuest or ClassCraft. And that lets your students create avatars and you can assign content right in there. It's free up to a certain point, and then if you want more features, of course, you can pay for them. That's kind of a really cool gamification type add-on. I've seen instructors who do hybrid courses online and face-to-face, and they'll use maybe breakout boxes, the EDU's breakout boxes, where they modify and make their own for syllabus. You can play with your syllabus or have your students play with your syllabus. There's just a lot of different ways and resources that are out there. And it really is up to your creativity too. One of the things that I thought was super cool that one of our instructional designers was doing was helping one of our criminal, oh gosh, what is the name of that course? I can't even remember. It was crime reporting, I think. And so what she did was a series of role plays situations where they videotaped, and took pictures of a crime report. And so your job was to figure out, as the lead investigator, what was happening. And so it's just a really playful way of like looking at something, but also like a real life application. It was authentic learning at its best, where the students were practicing things they were going to do in the field anyway. And Andrew was, spot on when he talked about, what do you remember from those games and why do you remember that? Well, because you were engaged. That's why you remember those things. And playing games really just hits on a different cognitive path for your students, and it's enjoyable.
Here's an example of, so we had it was the optometry game that I mentioned in one of the slides. I don't think I actually talked about it at all. In a previous session I did though, but basically what we had is a tangible card game that basically would allow two students, one to be a patient, one to be the doctor. And then they'd go kind of through this role-playing scenario. The doctor would, quiz the patient on, what their symptoms were and what they would kind of know. I put the link in the chat. If you want to click on it, you'll see kind of the setup for it. And basically how this ends up is if you scroll down to the bottom of that page, you'll see all of the patient cards. And what happens is the doctor will be like, okay, I'm going to run the color vision test. And then the patient would drag up the color vision card. And the doctor would see that in this case, they have, okay, there's numbers on the bottom for results that mean something to optometrists. I'm assuming that the 910 HRROD means something to them because they're smart. And then there's a time and a money value on each card. The challenge that we were having with this, what the optometry professor came to us with, was their students would go out into the real world and they were used to having all of this textbook information. And so they wanted perfect information before they would give a diagnosis. And so basically you'd end up in a scenario where like I might come in with like a headache and you're like, oh, you need an MRI. And whereas you might get to the same diagnosis by having a color vision or a very simple test. And so they wanted to have this kind of role-playing scenario where they would have tangible scores with time and money so that they would kind of respect the patient's time and money more. They didn't let me, so one of the things I really, really, really wanted to do was to have a patient that was just having a shitty day. To be able to come in there and like, no matter what the doctor asked, like, does your ear hurt? Oh yeah, it definitely hurts. How about your left knee? It hurts really bad all the time, especially on Tuesdays. And just see how much time that they could waste with no diagnosis. And they didn't want to distract that much, which I can't really blame them. But like I said, I really thought that a non-diagnosis would be a lot of fun. Let's see, Sue was asking about search and destroy. It has not been adapted to an online context, correct. One of the real challenges with a search and destroy, students have to have access to a library search database. And a lot of times that's not always available off campus. That might just be a Ferris thing, but I know a lot of times we have a hard time kind of having that same functionality outside of the library without having all sorts of logins and stuff like that. So usually what it is it's the students coming in into a lab environment and playing this game with the librarians. It used to be a case where the librarians would come into your class, and if you were doing any type of research paper in your class, they would then give you a lecture on proper research or searching methods. And from every librarian I've ever talked to, they've said that that is the most horrible lecture to give in the world, because everyone goes, oh, I can search, I know how to do Google. And then as soon as they actually need to search anything academic, they don't find the right information that they need, and they always end up coming back to them. So they built this game, and I guess the context of how it does it, your search results become your life total, and then I'm trying to limit your search results down to 0. And so as soon as I can get your search results down to 0, you're dead. And it's kind of fun because it's all the different limiting factors that you would have in a academic search engine. And then they're just applying them in different ways with different keywords and different mediums and different peer review levels and stuff like that. So, all right, I'm officially 1 minute over. Anything that we should talk more about? We can kind of hang out here and keep talking, because as I understand it now, there's no closing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
okay. Yep, Kelly said correct. So we can just kind of hang out here for the rest of the day. And
sorry, we did that before yours so that you could take as long as you needed, because we thought this would be you might need to explain. So go ahead, or whatever. People are free to leave the conference. We'll keep talking.
Cool. So if anyone has any kind of questions, you can chat, you can unmute. Like I said, I'm free to chit chat about the rest of the day and brainstorm game ideas.
Do you know of any games? Because I've been trying to think of this for my kids are going into high school and I want them to be excited about chemistry. I was trying to do something with like periodic table and like
There's
the
some really
elements
good
with
ones.
the magic cards. Do you have any that are out there like that?
Genus games. They do ones on covalence. They do some other ones that are more biology based, but they're basically a card games that all STEM. Let me get the link here. Yeah, here we go. Put that in chat. I haven't played any of their history games yet. Honestly, I would probably be a lot more critical of those just because of my experience with reacting to the past. That has set the bar so high for history games that it's going to be really hard to make me not recommend that to every history teacher ever. I suppose I should link the reacting to the past one too. That's actually out of Barnard College. And here's that one. Any other kind of discipline specific ones or composition and writing? There's a couple of games. One's called Fiasco and one's called Microscope. Most of those are actually really more storytelling type games, but if you're getting into kind of like composition and story arc, maybe it kind of depends on what level of composition and writing. It might give them a first draft of something just to kind of polish up. It'll give them something. It'll give them some content at very least. Fiasco, like I said, is kind of a much more of a party game, and is almost more based off of like improv mentality. So it's a lot of building off of other people's ideas and continuing on into the story arc. One thing I've found with writing games, there was another one. There was another one called Sojourner Tale. Sojourn. All right, I'm drawing a blank on that one, but it was it was actually a board game that was designed by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And of course, I can't find it right now. If I'm not mistaken, I've got a copy of it up in my garage. But if you look at, it was Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And it was something like Sojourner Tales, something like that. And basically you went around a board and you picked up different story elements. And your heroes, the protagonist that you were playing would get more influence in the story the farther that you progressed through it. So definitely worth looking at. And let's see, what are we looking at here? A syllabus formatted like a skill tree. Yeah, I've seen quite a bit of those. Might even have a couple examples of them. I haven't done it. I'm surprisingly traditional when it comes to my classroom environment. And part of that is because I'm teaching game design, and it has always felt a little bit too meta to gamify game design. And I part of me feels bad about that, but I also go, it's not something that I'm too concerned with. I really, really like helping other faculty incorporate these things into much more traditional academic environments. But like I said, when you're teaching game design, I'm already doing so many like super high creative game elements that the students don't seem to need any more gamification or more engagement. They're very self-motivated, and just bringing them back into the fold of reality sometimes helps. Where I've seen the syllabus really succeed is one of the big things with game design is giving students or giving players meaningful choices. And so if you kind of take that same mentality into the syllabus, and then also diminishing returns. So you might like to write papers. And so if you write a paper for me, you get 100 points. You still really like to write papers, but your next paper, it's only going to be worth 80 points. And you might still really like to like papers, but the next one that you write for me is only going to be worth 60 points. Now, you probably don't like giving presentations, but you can probably get more than 60 points on a presentation you give to me for the first time, because that's out of a scale of 100. And so even if you do the really like the worst presentation that you ever give, you're still probably going to get 65 points out of it. And as soon as you remove away that 65 is a D, and you just go, it's just points. You're just getting points, and you need to get to 1,000 points, and however you want to get there, go for it. And if you really just want to grind out papers, that's great. First one's 100, next one's 80, next one's 60, next one's 40, next one's 20. And maybe everyone after that's worth 20. But you know what? Try something else. You know, give me an interpretive dance on the meaning of something. And here's, even if it's the worst one ever, you're going to get more than 20 points. And it really kind of gives students that freedom to make a choice. And honestly, I have seen some, oddly enough, mostly honors students that just want papers. And they will grind out papers and they will get an A because they can just write papers in their sleep. And they will write 3-page papers every single week, and they will be happy with their 20 points, and don't make me do anything different ever, and I'll work my way through this. Sweet. If that's really what you want to do, go for it. But also know that if you just want to try something else, it's going to be a lot easier. And usually what I'll find out is you kind of mention that enough times in class, they kind of catch on to it because there's that logical math part of their brain that they're like, boy, I am working pretty hard on these papers. And he said that he would let me do a 10-minute video on something. I don't like doing videos, but it's going to be 10 minutes. And even if I do a really bad job, I know I'm going to get at least, you know, if it's the first one, like I said, if you're getting 60 points on the first one out of 100, that's still an amazing bump from that's like 9 pages worth of papers. So, yeah, so you just kind of, you play with the scoring system. And, you know, from a game design aspect, that's part of every game that you've ever designed. There's a scoring mechanic, there's a scoring metric. You reward the behavior that you want. And you keep adding in diminishing returns for the behavior you don't want. You can do penalties, but just reward less. It's the same thing. Yep. We were talking earlier, one of my neighbors here had you know, their front porch camera had a mama bear and 2 cubs walk through it. So yeah, we're not walking the dog tonight. So.
Chicken shit.
Yes, 100% yes.
Just take your 9 mil and you'll be all right.
A 9 mil just pisses them off.
Yeah, well, it depends on where you hit them, Andrew.
I can't shoot straight when I'm not scared.
Thanks so much, you guys. This is really, really helpful. All right. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks.
Andrew, I posted earlier. Are you available if I wanted to come in and talk in a game in the fall?
More than likely.
I have a card and board game that I do now. The Oops game. I'm sure you're familiar with that, or not?
Not directly, but probably.
Well, I'm trying to see if I can put it digital instead, especially if we're going to be potentially teaching that way.
Mm-hmm. Did you happen to go to that one, the pharmacy link that I sent up earlier?
I sat through your session yesterday.
Okay. Yep. So that same type of thing.
Well, yeah, the Oops is just, and it's, maybe it's what would you recommend? What language do you guys program in? Because I'll be quite honest, I looked to see if there was the digital gaming.
You're not going to use
classes.
You're not going to use any coding or any language. What we're going to do is we're going to find a platform. So it'd be something like Tabletop Simulator, or like this Tabloro.
Okay.
And then, like I said, there's no coding to it. So we're not programming in the game instructions. We're just creating the simulated environment for it. If you want something that is actually programming in the rules and the directions of the game, that is infinitely more complex.
Right. Okay.
And probably something that would be outside the scope of anything within the next, honestly, year. Because even the most basic rule set takes a lot to code into it.
Right. I've coded before, so but I think were you the one that said something about Pascal yesterday?
Yep. Yeah, I've programmed in a number of.
My languages are Fortran 77 and COBOL,
Yep.
which I understand I would have been a hot commodity for the government because a lot of their IRS source code is still written in COBOL, which is amazing since it's pretty dead.
Yep.
And, I think I actually learned 5 languages.
Yeah, I'm
and
probably pretty close.
at Michigan, they actually counted that as a foreign language requirement. And you think about it, it makes sense because there's so much syntax that you have to learn in computers. It's no different than learning a language.
My high school counted Pascal as a foreign language too.
Yeah. I also took five years of Spanish, but that's...
Yeah, I've never taken a real foreign language.
So, all right. So the Tabletop Simulator, is that what you called it?
Yep. There's Tabletop Simulator. There's Tabletopia. There's a couple of those.
Okay.
That
and that other one's Tabulora?
Yeah. The link was in a couple of the different sessions here. If you email me, just let me know.
Okay.
Yep.
I got it.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think because it's what I do well, you see, this game is something I do the very first day of class because it associates risk and planning, and that's and it's in the scheduling class. And one of the things was, why do we schedule projects? To mitigate risk. So what happens if we don't plan? Well, that's what the whole concept of the Oops game is. You see the scoring if they don't, how the scoring is really bad if you don't plan.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be quite honest, that after yesterday's class and I was sitting in the shower this morning, I was thinking, damn, I have great thoughts in showers or at bedtime, and I was like, damn, I should look to maybe digitize that. And then I could, then it's, because 2 scenarios, there is no really thinking. There's one, you either avoid risk or one, you ignore risk. The third one is you evaluate risk. So that's the one where you decide what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be easy to do. It's just getting around to figure it out. And so I will look at these. I'll probably also email my nephew.
Where did the
he's
cards
a programmer
come
at
from?
Microsoft.
Where did the cards come from?
Where did the cards come from?
Like, where did this game come from?
The Oops game?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's from Harvard or not. I've seen it with Stanford.
One thing we kind of have to be careful with too is if someone else owns the intellectual property, that can be bad.
Of the game itself?
Correct.
I have run across many articles on it. So, I mean, I actually was supposed to present a paper. I was scheduled to present it in April in Liverpool, England on it. Obviously, I did not. And
but this gets into copyright, and if we're switching the medium and the format, that can be really, really bad and not legal.
Oh, never thought of it that way. Okay.
That's what I tell my game design students. The number one thing is to not get sued. And so we can do a lot with the exact same comments. And so maybe it's just not using their images and their card backing, but if we have the same exact game idea and game mechanics, that's completely legal. But if we're using their artwork and their words.
Oh, no. In fact, that's what I create my own artwork for everything. And I've actually modified the game from what I saw when it was played because I've got actually a couple variations. One is you roll a die, and so your penalty now is either 1 or 6 points, and instead of just a standard 3 points, which is the way the scenario is. Because when we fail to plan, sometimes it's okay, even though we failed. It's a minor error. Something shows up a day early. Okay, who cares? But it can also be very major error, like 6 points, where this is, meaning we now have something out there and we have a whole crew waiting to work, and they've been waiting a week because you didn't order the right parts, and now we're costing money.
Yep, that's -6.
Yeah, well, that's and this is a game like golf. The low score wins.
Yeah, no, and
I always forget bowling and golf. I get those two confused sometimes.
And that's where, as long as it's not, because the biggest thing that like copyright is for is the language and the art assets, and as long as those are custom, the game mechanics themselves are not copyright. It's the assets surrounding it. So
no, and it isn't. I mean, it could be a plain card as far as I'm concerned. It's flipping over, it's shuffling the cards and then flipping over a random card between 1 and 9 and trying to get that done. So, all right, I'll look at the tabletop simulator and Tabloro and see where
probably
I go.
the tabletop simulator sounds the most. I think there's a little bit of a cost with that one, so maybe that doesn't work with students. And honestly, maybe it's even something like, Google Sites. Maybe we can kind of program it in there to do a random number generator.
Okay. Well, it's like I said, it's something I've thought about, especially now when I was teaching this second half of the term online. So, and I just, I know it's only you and I know, apparently, I wanted to thank you for your help in, in March, helping me get going.
I vaguely remember March, but I do remember that. It's been a heck of a semester.
But it seemed to go all right. I was able to do Zoom pretty well, and then with Canvas.
Wonderful.
There's some things that I found out negatively that I didn't like in Canvas because I had multiple answers. And I didn't realize because it's a text.
Oh, yeah.
If a student puts 28 point or 28.0, that's not the same as 28, so it marked it wrong.
Yep.
And so I had to go back through and hand correct all these potential errors. And But, live and learn, right?
Yep.
And then by the time the final came, I said, you will put it in this format.
With 1 decimal point.
Exactly. Or no decimal places. And it was right there. And if they didn't do it, I wish there was a way, and maybe there is, that you could give partial credit that if they had 28, it'd be 5 points. If it's 28 point, it's 3 points. 28.0, it's 3 points. And anything else, it's 0 points or something.
Yep.
But I don't think you can in there in Canvas, and not that I could find.
Yeah, not that I know of off the top of my head either.